Hello and a warm welcome back. Today on the bench is the big green amp, and at the moment, as you see, it's got loads of probes and all sorts of leads going in and out of it, and this is to try and find out why it is doing what it is doing. If I point you at the scope and zoom you in, you will see a line on the oscilloscope. The oscilloscope, the Tektronix 545B, is configured in XY mode, meaning instead of having the time base going, our horizontal input is doing something and a vertical input is doing something else. So yeah, we're going to get into that later though. This is not what this video is about. What this video is about, in my last video I asked what you wanted me to do a video on. Only one person really replied, and that was Brumadam. So this video is for you, brother. And he asked how I got into electronics. I'll try to keep this as brief as I can. I was born in the mid-60s, grew up in the 1970s, chopper bikes, really good music on the radio, you know, really sort of pretty bog standard. Growing up, mum and dad, sister, all that sort of thing. And I mean, I'm sort of trying to access memory banks here that have been jaded over time and whatnot. But I think in about 78, 79, punk happened, punk hit the UK. A lot of people were getting into forming bands, and a few years previously a friend of mine, Maury, gave me a Black Sabbath Greatest Hits album. Previous to that I'd been listening to ABBA and, you know, maybe the Boomtown Rats and things, but I was a big ABBA fan, you know, when I was like, I don't know, 10 or something. ABBA are a bloody good band. Anyway, so yeah, I think I got a bass. I asked my mum to get me a bass on hire purchase, and I used to be a paper boy. At the paper shop there used to be, back in the day, lots of electronics magazines like Practical Electronics and things like that. In these magazines it showed you, using Veriboard, how to make like fuzz boxes and things like that. So I got into that a little bit, messed around with electronics. I also had a train set upstairs as well, and I used to sort of mess about with the electricity up there, blowing capacitors up and all that sort of thing. And yeah, I think I tried to build a 100-watt Elector amplifier, but Elector compared to Practical Electronics was a whole leap forward. It didn't give you as much information. You had to sort of know what you were doing. Anyway, moving on a little while, I left school in about 1981, and I could have gone two different ways. I got an interview at Wilmorton College in Derby to do a TV and radio repairing course. I took along some of the things that I'd made, a tone control for the 100-watt electro amplifier, and got a place at Wilmorton College. However, the other option open to me was, this is the early 80s, there's no jobs around. I went for a job at the Remy, which used to be a place called Chilwell in Nottingham. Didn't get the place. But instead of going on this TV and radio repairing course at Wilmorton College, I went on what was called at the time a YOP, Young Person's Opportunity Programme or some shit like that. For 25 quid a week, for 6 months, you went into like a factory or other business, and it was basically cheap labour, but you were supposed to learn stuff. So I was like an assistant to an electrician, in a lace factory in Long Eaton in Nottinghamshire. There was, I think there still is a lace factory there, Birkin's Lace. Anyway, got into electronics. My next, that ended, went on another yacht or whatever. I think they changed the names by then, in a spring factory that made springs for upholstery, you know, settees and all that. While I was there, this bloke had bought this boat, and by this time I'm already experimenting with drugs, LSD, cannabis, amphetamines, you know, all that sort of thing, as you did in those days. I got into drugs basically because when I was about 14 I got into the occult, reading Aleister Crowley, you know, tarot cards, W.B. Yeats, all that sort of thing. And this bloke had a boat. I used to help him fix the boat after work, and he used to buy me a few pints for the job. Anyway, going down the road a little ways, this chap decided to sell his boat, and and by this time roughly about this time, there was a thing called the convoy, peace convoy it was called in those days, and at this place called Ticko Lane in Shepshire, a friend of mine who had a cousin somewhere over that way took me down there. When I walked on site at Ticko Lane this must have been what, 1980, early 80s, it was the most magical experience I've ever experienced. It was like, you know, wood smoke. It was like going back into medieval times. Lots of vans, wood smoke coming out the chimneys, lot of smoking of chillums and things like that. And I saw how people were living. I could have got a van, instead I got this boat. So electronics then stopped, didn't get into it again until about, I was living on the road in a horse box in about 2005, 2000s, and all this time I'd been playing guitars and things like that. At my local tip in those days, you could go and just buy stuff. So I went down the tip one day to take a load of rubbish, and there was a Revox B77 and a TIAC A3440 reel to reel. So I bought those for a £5. Yeah, I know. You used to be able to buy reel-to-reel tape recorders back then, only, you know, 20 years ago, for a £5. Bought those. They didn't work. They'd come from an old recording studio. I think the belts had gone and the reefer cap on the input mains filter had gone. Replaced those, and as a result of getting into trying to record music, I got back into electronics, started picking things up. And then by this time, you have to remember, like in about the early 2000s, people didn't have computers. I mean, I was living in a truck, you know, with no electricity, although I did have a generator. Anyway, I think somebody gave me an old computer. I could run it off the generator in my Bedford lorry for a little while, and by this time my daughter was born, started getting into valve amplifiers and all that. Ooh, valve amplifiers, you know. And then I started to pick up bits and bobs and all the rest of it. And then I really started to find out what the crack was when I first tried to build a valve amplifier. I bought a Hammond TA 1650, I think, 1650 TA output transformer, 100 watt output transformer off eBay for, I don't know, 60 quid, and that's where it all started. I'd already been sort of messing about trying to build power supplies and things like that, but building that first amplifier, which was a 120 watt 6 EL34 mono block amplifiers, that is where I really learnt my craft. And since then I've built several other amplifiers, you know, as you've seen on this channel, and here I am today. I'm self-taught. Everything I've picked up is either off the internet or downloading PDFs off the internet, reading them, but more than anything I've learnt by doing, like doing what I'm doing now, which is connecting the scope up to an amplifier, making mistakes and learning as I go. And that's where I get a bit ratty sometimes when people say, people are very lazy sometimes, they say, oh Jesus, you know, how do you do this, that and the other? Well, go and find out, learn yourself, because I can tell you the answer, but it will not stay in your head. It won't have the same significance if you had done it yourself and found out yourself. But there you go, anybody can pick up electronics. It's pretty simple on one level. It gets, like any subject, whether it's keeping goats or downhill skiing or whatever, there are nuances to it and all the rest of it. Right, I've rambled on enough. Brumadam also said a long time ago, I haven't forgotten, mate, that he wanted to see my living room. So as I've already mentioned, I've led a very unconventional life, and I'm pretty eccentric, and I live in a cottage in Lincolnshire, and I'm very fortunate to have a very understanding landlord, and so I've decorated it in my own style. So we've got a pair of my daughter's flip-flops on the ceiling with an earring hanging there, and over here I'll put the light on because I'm not sure. I've got various valves. I've always, like, you know, for a long time lived in the woods, lived in benders. A bender is like a tent basically, so I had not so much nowadays a real affinity with the outdoors. So yeah, just rocks. I carve wood as well. These are bits of things I just carve, you know, using a knife. Bits of interesting wood with shapes and things like that. And that's the green man. I have a few green men. Got one there, and one there. I've always had an affinity with the colour green. I love green. Just green, it just, yeah, it has a big resonance for me. And I used to live in the woods, and I used to be known as the Green Man. Also there is a dog skull, and so when I used to live in the woods and all that, I used to pick up dead animals, cut the heads off, and like, yeah, bung them in a box. Flies come, maggots eat them, and then bleach them. In this case, that dog was one I found on, I don't know, in some fields on an old site somewhere. I used to have a lot of fox skulls, a lot more skulls than I've got now. I gave a lot of them away a few years ago to a young lad who was really, really interested in nature. So I gave him quite a large collection of my skulls. Green Man, yeah. Just have some weird shit. Like an arm off a, where do you call it? Mannequin thing, you know, shop model thing. Bits of string, because I'm very practical. You know, you always need a bit of string. Lots of leads, oscilloscope, electronics, big speakers, hi-fi. So music, basically without music I'd go absolutely fucking insane. A few pictures of my daughter and things she's drawn. That's Shiva dancing, and Lord Shiva, when Shiva starts to dance, the world is coming to an end. And there's the master, Leonard Cohen. I've always loved Leonard Cohen, back in the day before he wrote Hallelujah and all that. It just used to be a few old heads like me and probably Brumadam and all that who liked Leonard Cohen. Everybody used to hate him, think he was depressing. So yeah, he got popular. That's one of my guitars. That's my bass. Old mirrors. And this is the kitchen. Pretty bog standard. Usually I have lots of snails, blue tacked. And so people come in and say, "You got snails everywhere," and start freaking out. I just like weird shit. Some old oil lamps. Buddha, he's been with me on every site I've ever parked up on and all the rest of it. He's always been there, looking a bit worse for wear. Some really big plants. I've always had plants, every house I've ever lived in, although I've not lived in many houses. Just boxes of stuff. This is a truck that I used to live in. That's my wood burner, that's my dog Toby, 2 cats. Just old sort of cuttings, like this one. This sort of makes me laugh. Who's leading who? Is the monkey in charge, or is the bird, or is it the bloke? Icarus, because it's always a reminder. And this is out of an old Charles Dickens book. I just love the look of the fella. If I could have a hat like that and old skanky boots and everything, I'd be a happy bloke. But there we go. Another picture out of an old Dickens book. And lastly, that's a 3-string instrument my Uncle Arthur made. He's now passed away, but he used to make musical instruments. Very skilled woodworker, cabinet maker. And hold on, let's bring the light on. Another what do you call it? I think they're called etching, from a Dickens book. And this frame was made by an old girlfriend of mine, Jo. Yeah, so that's it, mate, Adam. There we go. Vishnu. How was it? Well, not Vishnu. Krishna. I think that's Krishna. So I've got like one foot in the in paganism, another foot in the East. I'm just an old head, basically. And of course the bloody Christmas tree. So there you go, Adam. That's probably filled in a few, I don't know, sated your curiosity, whatever you call it. Right. I've waffled on for long enough now. So I need to do a lot more research on these lyserdew patterns. I need to do a lot more research on these lyserdew patterns and make sure that my scope is calibrated and all that. And then I'm going to try and find out why the high frequency response in the BGA is getting worse with negative feedback applied when it should get better. I think I have an idea why that is, and I think it's something to do with the output transformer and the output stage of the amplifier, because I was poking about yesterday. Anyway, I digress. That's it for now. Happy New Year and all that. Although with the way things are, shit, it's going to be an interesting year, I think, 2025. Thank you very much, all of you who have been watching over, the last few years when I've been putting videos out. I hope 2025 will be a good year for you, although, we'll see. Thank you very much for watching. Right, I'll shut up rambling. Take care of yourselves. Ta-da for now.